The ocean covers more than 70% of our planet, yet we have explored less than 5% of its depths. What secrets lurk beneath? What creatures have yet to be discovered? Among the many legends of the deep, one name has endured for centuries. Leviathan. A beast of unimaginable size, a force of destruction that no ship could outrun. But is Leviathan just a myth? Or could something like it still be waiting beneath the waves? The earliest stories of Leviathan come from texts written thousands of years ago. Descriptions vary, but the message remains the same: this was no ordinary sea creature. It was something powerful, something feared. During the age of exploration, sailors returned with stories of encounters at sea. They spoke of something enormous lurking beneath their ships, something that moved with intelligence, watching, waiting. Some claimed it had eyes that glowed in the dark. Others swore they saw its scales break the surface, like armor forged in the depths. But was Leviathan a real creature? Or just the imagination of terrified sailors? Science has uncovered real-life sea creatures that once seemed impossible. The giant squid was once thought to be a myth, until it was finally captured on camera. And if a creature like that remained hidden for centuries, could something even bigger be out there? The deepest parts of the ocean, like the Mariana Trench, reach depths where no sunlight can penetrate. Entire ecosystems exist in places humans have never explored. Could Leviathan be lurking somewhere in these unknown waters? Some sonar readings have detected massive, moving objects at depths where no known animal should exist. Scientists remain skeptical, but deep-sea explorers continue to search. Reports of strange sea creatures still surface today. In 2017, a massive, unidentified carcass washed up in Indonesia, baffling experts. Some speculated it was a whale, but others weren't so sure. Fishermen and sailors continue to report encounters with something enormous moving beneath their boats. A shadow, a disturbance in the water, a presence they cannot explain. Could these sightings be proof that Leviathan is more than just legend? For centuries, sailors feared what lay beneath the waves. Today, science tells us the ocean is still largely unexplored. With each new discovery, we realize how little we truly know. If Leviathan was ever real, is it possible it still exists, hidden in the uncharted depths? Or is it something else entirely, something waiting for the right moment to reveal itself? The sea has always held its secrets. And some mysteries were never meant to be uncovered.
Leviathan, the terror beneath the waves were restless that night. Beneath the starlit sky, the sea stretched endlessly, dark and foreboding. Captain Elias gripped the ship's railing, his weathered hands trembling ever so slightly. He had spent decades at sea, but tonight, something felt different, something felt wrong. The wind howled through the rigging as his crew murmured among themselves. They had all heard the stories. Legends of a beast so massive that it could blot out the moon, of eyes that burned like twin suns beneath the water. A name passed between their lips in hushed whispers. Leviathan. It had been a fool's errand, chasing this myth. But Elias had seen the signs, the sudden disappearance of entire fishing boats, the wreckage that washed ashore with deep, unexplainable gashes. He had studied the ancient texts, Job, Psalms, Isaiah, all speaking of a creature that no man could tame. The beast is real, Elias muttered under his breath. A scream shattered the uneasy silence. The lookout, perched high above, pointed frantically at the water. And then, the sea itself seemed to rise. A massive form broke through the surface. First, a ridge of jagged scales, then a monstrous head, its eyes burning like molten gold. The crew stood frozen, paralyzed by the sheer size of the thing. It wasn't just large, it was impossible. Leviathan exhaled, and from its gaping maw came not just air, but steam, thick and suffocating. The waves churned violently as the ship groaned under the force of the beast's emergence. "Man the harpoons!" Elias roared, though he knew, deep down, that no weapon forged by men could pierce the creature's hide. The harpoons flew, but they bounced harmlessly off its scales. The beast turned, its gaze locking onto them with something that felt almost sentient. A deep, guttural sound rumbled from its throat, something between a growl and laughter. And then, it struck. The ship lurched violently as Leviathan's tail crashed into the hull. The wood splintered, the mast snapped, and men were flung into the abyss. Elias clung desperately to the railing as water swallowed the deck. For a brief moment, he saw it clearly, Leviathan in all its terrible majesty. Not a monster, not a myth, but something ancient. Something that had ruled the deep long before men dared sail these waters. The last thing he saw before the darkness took him was the beast's eyes watching, waiting, as if deciding whether he was worth sparing. And then, the sea swallowed him whole. The ship was never found. The crew never returned. But sometimes, on moonless nights, fishermen swear they see something moving beneath the waves. Something vast. Something watching. The sea was eerily calm the morning after the storm. The horizon stretched empty, save for the occasional glint of sunlight reflecting off the endless water. No wreckage, no bodies, just silence. But Leviathan had left its mark. Miles away, on the shores of a small fishing village, a lone survivor washed up. His body was bruised, his clothes tattered, but he was alive. Captain Elias gasped for air as he rolled onto his back, staring at the sky. He had no memory of how he had escaped, no recollection of the final moments before the ship was lost. All he could remember were those eyes glowing, ancient, intelligent. The villagers surrounded him cautiously. They had seen men come from the sea before, but not like this. His skin was ice cold, his breath shallow. One of the elders knelt beside him, eyes filled with recognition, as if she had been expecting him. "You saw it," she whispered. Elias turned his head slowly, his voice hoarse. "You know of the beast?" She nodded. "We do not speak its name here. To do so is to invite it back." The villagers took him in, nursing him back to health. Days passed, but the nightmares remained. Every night, he saw the creature again, felt the ship splinter beneath him, felt the crushing weight of the ocean dragging him down. And yet, something had let him go. Why? Elias was not a man prone to fear, but something inside him had changed. He could no longer hear the sound of the waves without feeling as though he were being watched. One evening, as the sun bled into the horizon, he approached the elder woman again. "Tell me," he said. "What is it? What does it want?" She sighed, staring at the water. "Leviathan is not just a beast, Captain. It is a force. It was here before us, and it will be here long after we are gone. It does not hunt for hunger. It hunts for balance." "Balance?" Elias frowned. She turned to him, eyes dark with warning. "The ocean does not belong to man. It belongs to it. And when we take too much, when we disturb the order, Leviathan reminds us who truly rules these waters." The wind picked up, and Elias shivered. Somewhere in the distance, the sea rumbled, not like waves against the shore, but like something stirring deep beneath. He never returned to the ocean after that. He settled in the village, a man forever haunted by what he had seen. He tried to move on, but at night, he would wake with a start, hearing phantom waves crashing against a ship that no longer existed. And sometimes, when the moon hung low over the water, he swore he could see something just beneath the surface, watching, waiting. Years passed, but the nightmares never faded. Captain Elias had long abandoned the sea, yet the sea had not abandoned him. Even in sleep, he felt its pull, the endless, black abyss calling him back. The villagers whispered about him. They said he was a man touched by something beyond human understanding. Some feared him. Others pitied him. But no one, not even the elders, dared speak of what had happened on that doomed voyage. Until one fateful night, a young boy, no older than 10, ran into the village square, his face pale as bone. "The fishermen," he cried. "They haven't returned." The villagers exchanged uneasy glances. The waters had been calm, too calm. It was rare for a boat to be delayed, but stranger still was the eerie silence that followed. No gulls, no waves, just a vast, breathless void stretching to the horizon. Elias knew. Before anyone could stop him, he grabbed a lantern and made his way to the shoreline. The tide was low, revealing jagged black rocks and pools of still water that reflected the moonlight. And then something else. Footsteps, leading from the sea. His breath caught in his throat. The prints were massive, too large for any man, yet too defined to belong to any known creature. They were clawed, pressing deep into the damp sand, forming a trail that led inland. A chill ran through him. Leviathan had never left the ocean before. It had never needed to. So why now? A distant boom shook the air. It came from the village. Screams followed. Elias ran, his heart hammering against his ribs. As he reached the square, he saw the crowd gathered in horrified silence, staring at someone standing at the center of the firelit clearing. A fisherman. Or at least, what was left of him. His eyes were hollow, his skin as pale as the moon. He was drenched, seawater dripping from his hair, his beard tangled with strands of kelp. But what froze Elias in place was the mark, a deep, twisting scar burned into the man's chest, pulsating like the glow of a dying ember. The fisherman opened his mouth, and a voice that was not his own came forth, low and echoing, like the currents of the abyss. The balance has been broken. Elias felt the blood drain from his face. The villagers recoiled, some falling to their knees in prayer, others fleeing into their homes. The fisherman's body convulsed, and for a brief moment, something moved beneath his skin, something shifting, writhing, waiting to emerge. Elias knew what it meant. Leviathan had sent a warning. And this time, there would be no mercy. The fisherman let out a choked gasp, his body trembling violently as if something inside him was trying to crawl its way out. His hollow eyes locked onto Elias, and for a brief, terrible moment, Elias swore he saw something else staring back, something ancient, something inhuman. Then, with an unnatural crack, the fisherman collapsed. The villagers held their breath. No one dared move. But Elias knew this was only the beginning. The balance has been broken, the words echoed in his head. What had they done to anger it? Leviathan had never set foot beyond the ocean before. The sea was its kingdom. The land was for men. But something had changed. Elias turned to the elder woman, the only one who might know the truth. What does it mean? He demanded. What balance? She closed her eyes, as if mourning something already lost. The sea does not belong to us, Elias. We take what we need, but never more. We honor the old ways. She hesitated, then whispered, but not everyone does. A murmur passed through the crowd. A few villagers avoided Elias's gaze, their hands twitching nervously. He understood immediately. Someone had broken the pact, and Leviathan had come to collect. A distant rumble shook the ground, low, guttural, coming from the sea. The tide surged unnaturally fast, waves crashing against the rocks. With violent fury. It was coming. Elias didn't wait. He grabbed a torch and ran toward the cliffs, desperate to see for himself. The ocean churned like a living thing, its surface roiling with something massive beneath. Then, out of the depths, it rose. Leviathan. Its scales shimmered like blackened steel, glistening under the moonlight. Its eyes, those terrible, golden eyes, locked onto him with a knowing gaze. It was more than a beast. More than a legend. It was a god of the deep. And it was angry. The villagers screamed as the creature unleashed a sound unlike anything human ears had ever heard, a deafening, otherworldly roar that shook the very bones of the earth. Elias knew there was only one thing left to do. Someone had broken the pact. Someone had angered the sea. And unless they gave it back what it was owed, Leviathan would take everything. The storm arrived with Leviathan. Winds howled through the village, tearing roofs from homes and sending waves crashing against the shore. The sky churned like a living thing, dark clouds twisting in unnatural shapes. The sea was rising not in tides, but in something far worse. Something hungry. Elias stood at the cliffs, torch in hand, as the beast loomed over the horizon. It did not attack, not yet. It was waiting for them to make a choice. Behind him, the villagers huddled together, terrified, whispering prayers that would never be heard. He turned to the elder, who broke the pact. Silence. Then, a voice trembling, weak. I did. The crowd parted, revealing a man Elias knew well, Mateo, a fisherman. Desperate to feed his family. He stood, shoulders slumped, face filled with regret. The fish were gone, he whispered. The sea gave us nothing for weeks. My children were starving. So he swallowed hard. I went beyond the boundary. Gasps rippled through the villagers. They all knew the rule. The line of black stones, placed centuries ago along the seabed, marked the limit of their waters. To cross it was to steal from Leviathan's domain. No one had dared until now. Elias clenched his fists. It had been no ordinary storm. Leviathan had starved them on purpose. It had tested them, forced them to make a choice. And when one of them had broken, it had come to collect. Thunder rumbled as the beast in the waves let out another guttural growl, its golden eyes never leaving Elias. It didn't want the village. Not yet. It wanted him. A sacrifice. Elias exhaled. He had seen Leviathan once before and lived. Maybe that was a mistake. Maybe he had been spared for this moment. The ground trembled as the waves surged closer, swallowing the lower half of the village. Time was running out. He turned to Matteo, then to the terrified villagers. There was only one way to end this. A price had to be paid, and Elias would be the one to pay it. Before anyone could stop him, he stepped forward. "I will go," he called out, his voice steady. "I was the captain. The men who took more than they should have were under my command. If a life must be taken, take mine." The elder reached for him, but he was already walking toward the edge of the cliffs. The sea roared in approval. Leviathan moved, its massive head lowering until it loomed just above the waves, waiting. Elias took a breath, staring into those endless golden eyes one last time. Then he leaped. The cold water swallowed him whole. Darkness. Silence. Then, something moved. Not the waves. Not the current. Something, beneath him. The sea opened, and Leviathan's massive form surrounded him. Not to crush him. Not yet. To judge him. Elias drifted, weightless, as the golden eyes pierced into his soul. He felt his mind unravel, his memories peeling away like pages in an ancient book. His first voyage. His first storm. His first loss at sea. Then, something else. Visions of the past. The black stone boundary long before his time. The first sacrifice. The first bargain. It had never been about hunger. Never about vengeance. Leviathan was not a monster. It was the balance itself. The realization struck him like lightning. And then silence. The sea let him go. Elias gasped as his body broke the surface. The waves had calmed. The storm was gone. The village stood, untouched. And Leviathan was nowhere to be seen. The pact had been restored. The sea had claimed what it was owed. But Elias had been spared. Why? No one knew. And Elias never spoke of it again. Yet, from that day forward, the village never crossed the boundary again. The fish returned. The storms quieted. And the people whispered of the man who had faced the god of the deep. And lived. But on the darkest nights, when the tide was high and the wind was still, Elias could still feel it. Watching. Waiting. Because the sea never forgets. Years passed, but Elias never truly escaped the sea. He grew older, his hair turning silver, his body marked by the passage of time, but he never left the village. The people honored him as the man who had faced Leviathan and survived. Some called him blessed. Others whispered that he had been changed, touched by something beyond human understanding. And perhaps, in a way, he had. Elias could still feel it. A presence lingering beneath the waves. He never fished again, never set foot in a boat, never crossed beyond the tide's reach. But he would walk the shore at night, watching the water, waiting. And on some nights, the water would watch him back. The villagers learned to live by the rules, never taking more than they needed, never crossing the boundary. The fish remained plentiful, the storms stayed at bay, the ocean was calm. For now. But Elias knew the truth. Leviathan was not gone. It was only waiting. Then, one fateful evening, a strange tide rolled in. The sky was clear, the air still, but the waves lapped at the shore with a slow, deliberate rhythm. The kind that spoke of something deep beneath. Something moving. Elias stood at the edge of the sea, his old bones aching. His breath steady. And there, just beyond the shallows, he saw it. Not the whole creature. Just the outline, a shadow in the deep, massive, and motionless, like the ocean itself had taken shape. The golden eyes surfaced next. Watching. Recognizing. Elias did not move. He did not run. He had been waiting for this moment. A lifetime ago, he had been spared. But nothing was given freely. And tonight, the sea had returned for its due. He took one step forward, then another, until the water reached his waist, then his chest. He did not fight. He did not flinch. The sea embraced him. The villagers awoke to calm waters and a quiet shore. The storms did not return. The fish never left. But Elias was gone. There was no body, no footprints leading into the tide. Only the wind, whispering through the village like a forgotten promise. And though no one dared speak of it, the people knew. The pact had been honored once more. The balance had been restored. And somewhere, beneath the endless waves, Leviathan waited. For the next time the sea was betrayed. The legend of Elias and Leviathan became woven into the fabric of the village, passed down through whispered tales and cautious warnings. The fishermen never again crossed the boundary, nor did they dare take more than what was needed. The sea remained generous, the storms stayed at bay, and the village thrived. But every so often, when the tide rolled in just a little too far, when the waves whispered against the shore with voices that were not the wind, the people would pause. They would look to the horizon, searching for something unseen. Because deep in their hearts, they knew the truth. The sea never